Entering Ohio, the Mahoning Valley. Gritty, blue-collar, union, reliably Democratic for decades. No more. People like this, places like this, are part of how Trump has changed America. Ohio changed from a competitive purple state to a Trump red state because of the magic of his coalition here. But as we head into the midterms, the jobs he promised are not here. The revival in American manufacturing he promised is not here. Chris Anderson is the Mahoning County Democratic chairman. His midterm bet? Enough Trump voters will be part of electing Ohio's first Democratic governor in 15 years, and part of flipping a critical Senate seat from red to blue.
They got conned by a con man.
You're the Democrat, so you're supposed to say that. What do you see that tells you that things are different?
Well, I mean, drive around Mahoning County. For 8 years, there were Trump signs on every corner. There were flags. You couldn't go to a grocery store without seeing those red MAGA hats. I'd challenge you to find one.
It's true. These are hard to find now.
All right, people. Welcome back to Jack Mockler. Ohio, once considered Trump's safest electoral bet and the crown jewel of his working-class realignment, is showing signs of a seismic political shift that corporate media is largely ignoring. What was supposed to be the GOP's firmest stronghold is now revealing cracks that should have every Republican operative sweating. Think about the symbolism here. Trump Tower isn't just a building, it's the birthplace of the entire MAGA phenomenon. That escalator ride became one of the most iconic moments in modern political history. The Apprentice made him a household name. All of it, the branding, the mythology, the entire persona, it all traces back to that tower. So when you see Ohio, the state that embraced all of that more enthusiastically than almost anywhere else, starting to show signs of serious buyer's remorse, you have to understand just how significant that really is.
Maybe a clue, but hardly enough to answer the is MAGA cracking question. This is Local 1112 United Auto Workers, Lordstown, Ohio. Ground zero in the local debate about trusting Trump. General Motors made cars here for 5 decades, thousands of good union jobs, but the Lordstown plant closed in 2019, despite a first-term Trump promise it would stay open. Foxconn built this new factory on the GM site, but its workforce is non-union, and the factory is mostly idle now as the company decides what's next. Nearby, another new factory sold as Lordstown's new hope, Altium Cells, a joint EV battery venture between General Motors and South Korea's LG Electronics.
How many guys are working in that factory now?
Right now, all of production is shut down. 1,460 of us, I think there were. We're all laid off in January 5th, officially.
And you don't know until when?
Don't know till when.
Bob Swager leads the campaign committee at Local 1112. Everyone here remembers when Trump told them not to sell their homes, and later when he said new jobs would replace the GM jobs. The union endorsed Kamala Harris, but a big chunk of its voters voted Trump. And then the UAW endorsed Trump's tariffs.
They were hopeful that they were going to bring more jobs back to the United States.
Has that happened?
Now, before I go any further, I know what some of you are thinking. You're sitting there rolling your eyes thinking, here we go again, another media outlet trying to manufacture a narrative about Trump's political decline. And I get it. We've all seen the headlines that promised Trump was finished only to watch him prove everyone wrong. But here's the thing. This isn't speculation. This isn't punditry. This is documented, verified, expert-confirmed data showing a collapse in Trump's numbers that has Republican strategists genuinely questioning whether their candidates should distance themselves from their own sitting president heading into 2026. The numbers are dropping so fast that it's making political professionals who have spent decades studying Ohio politics scratch their heads in disbelief. And behind closed doors, in private strategy calls and hushed conversations, the panic is already setting in.
Not that I'm aware of.
Manufacturing employment is up a bit of late, but down 80,000 jobs overall since Trump returned to the White House. American auto manufacturing, down 25,000 jobs in Trump's second term.
Do you believe in 2026 the Democrats can actually win statewide for the Senate and win statewide for governor in Ohio?
Yes.
Mark Skenesny served overseas in Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan, was drawn to the Tea Party and then Trump after leaving the Army.
I let myself, I don't want to say get radicalized or anything, but I was very right-wing.
Skenesny had a change of heart in 2020, calls himself an independent, and is backing Democrats this year because he now views Trump and MAGA as dangerous to democracy.
I've talked to a lot of people whose views are changing, even in my own family. So I am hopeful that is starting to fracture.
Yet Skenesny concedes many Trump supporter friends will not budge.
And it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder than I thought.
They're not talking about this publicly yet, because that would be admitting weakness. And in politics, you never show weakness. But make no mistake, the quiet desperation is absolutely real. Now let me be clear about something, because I think it's important to be honest here. Trump's hardcore base remains rock solid. Nobody is questioning that. His approval rating within the Republican Party is still sitting around 85%. There's no internal challenge brewing, no serious primary threat. Within the MAGA bubble, everything looks perfectly fine on the surface. The rallies are still energetic. The base is still fired up. The true believers still believe. But Ohio isn't just a base state. That's the problem. That's the detail that makes this entire situation so much more dangerous for Republicans than they want to admit.
Most of Ohio is rural, and rural America is Trump country. But rural also means you drive a lot. High gas prices hurt. Farms dot the rolling hills of Albany in southeast Ohio. This one is unique.
The chickens are your supervisors?
Yeah.
400 or so sheep on 100 grassy acres. Lambing season. These sheep are pregnant. 200 to 250 more little lambs due any day now.
Up. Stay, Tilly. Stay. Stay.
Bill Krusling doesn't need much diesel or any fertilizer, so he's shielded from the Iran war cost spikes hitting many other farmers. He does okay, but is saddled by huge medical debts. His biggest complaints about Washington are corruption and deficit spending.
Trump promised to change the healthcare system, and he hasn't. He promised to reduce the debt, and he hasn't.
Well, it takes time. He had 4 years, but he was new to Washington. I don't blame Trump. I blame the Congress.
Where am I riding?
Right here.
I'm going to take the dog seat?
Yeah, she's coming no matter what.
Ohio is packed with genuine swing voters. Real people who voted for Obama and then voted for Trump. People who cross party lines based on whether their lives are getting better or worse. People who don't care about party loyalty or political tribalism. People who care about gas prices and grocery bills and whether their job is still going to be there next year. And those people, the ones who actually decide elections in competitive states, are done with Donald Trump. Not just mildly disappointed, not just a little disillusioned. They are actively turning against him in numbers that should terrify any political strategist who understands how elections are actually won and lost. A major analysis coming out of Bowling Green State University, and I want to emphasize that this is a respected Ohio institution, not some coastal think tank with an obvious ideological agenda, showed something absolutely stunning. Trump's favorability rating in Ohio went from +6 all the way down to -10 in roughly 1 year.
Krusling says no politician understands this life, and he's mad at both parties for not solving problems. But he will vote Republican in November because he's conservative and because he loves Trump, for the very reason so many people can't stand Trump.
He seems to like the fights.
Oh, he loves a fight.
Oh.
He loves a fight. And that's great. That's why I voted for him. This world's got way too many pearl clutchers. It's like, come on, people, give me a break.
Back on the road, heading south, Portsmouth is in Scioto County, along the Ohio River across from Kentucky. Trump won 74% here last time. Dale King was already wavering on Trump. The Iran war, the last straw. King opened his Portsmouth gym 16 years ago after returning home from 2 tours in Iraq.
It's crazy because that's like it's 20 years ago.
His office is full of military mementos, and showing it to a visitor stirs emotion.
Like, it's weird. I don't know. 20 years, and then we're dealing with Iran.
Let me put that in perspective, because numbers can feel abstract until you really think about what they mean. That's a 16-point swing in 12 months. In a state he won. In a state Republicans were counting on as part of their foundation heading into 2026. That's not a dip. That's not seasonal variation. That's not polling noise that can be explained away with some creative spin. That is a political collapse happening in real time. That is the equivalent of watching a building crumble, and Republicans are standing on the sidewalk trying to figure out whether to run for cover or try to hold it up with their bare hands. And the answer, according to people who study Ohio politics for a living, is becoming increasingly clear. Run. Get some distance. Get out from under the rubble before it lands on you. A political scientist named David Niven put it in terms that I absolutely cannot get out of my head. He described the situation this way. Trump was the wind in Ohio Republican sails, and now he's the bilge water. For those of you who aren't big boat people, let me translate. Bilge water is the nasty, grimy, disgusting liquid that collects at the very bottom of a boat. It's the stuff you have to constantly pump out before it sinks you. That is what a political expert is now calling Trump's value to Ohio Republicans. Not wind, not fuel, not an asset. Bilge water, something you have to actively work to get rid of just to stay afloat. Can you wrap your head around that? A guy who won this state twice, who held massive rallies here, who is considered the savior of the Republican Party in the Midwest, and now political scientists are comparing him to the gross water at the bottom of a boat. That quote is doing a lot of heavy lifting because it captures something really important about the situation Republicans find themselves in. This entire video is about what happens when a political party builds its whole identity around one person and then that person becomes a liability instead of an asset. Because that is exactly what's happening in Ohio right now. And Ohio isn't just some random Midwestern state you can brush aside. Ohio is the canary in the coal mine for what could happen to Republicans across the entire Midwest when 2026 rolls around. If Ohio starts flipping competitive, if the Senate race goes to a Democrat, if the governor's race tightens up, and Wisconsin is in play, Michigan is in play, Pennsylvania is in play, suddenly the Senate majority Republicans thought was locked up isn't locked up anymore. The whole map shifts, the entire national strategy changes, and everything Republicans have been planning for 2026 goes out the window. So here's what I'm going to do for you in this video. I'm going to break down exactly what's happening in Ohio and why it matters so much. I'm going to walk through the real numbers and what they actually mean for the people running in 2026. We're going to talk about why this story is so much bigger than just one state. And we're going to answer the question that every serious political watcher should be asking right now. Is the MAGA era starting to crack? And is Ohio the place where it finally breaks open? Stick with somebody's family has fucking lost her. Yeah. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly why smart Republicans are quietly losing sleep and why Democrats might have a real shot in places that seemed completely impossible just a couple of years ago. Let's get into it. Let's set the scene properly because the context here is absolutely crucial for understanding just how big a deal this really is. It wasn't that long ago that Ohio was basically Trump's trophy state, the piece of political real estate he could point to and say, see, this is what I've built. This is the new Republican coalition. This is the permanent realignment. He would go to Ohio for rallies, and the crowds were massive. The energy was electric. People were genuinely fired up. He won Ohio in 2016, which was a huge deal because it showed that his message was connecting with working-class voters in a way that Republicans hadn't managed to do in decades. Many won it again in 2020, which seemed to confirm that this wasn't a fluke, that this was a genuine shift in the political landscape. And when he came back for his second term, the working assumption among strategists on both sides of the aisle was that Ohio was just done, finished, locked up red, a state that had permanently realigned and wasn't going anywhere. Conventional wisdom had settled on it. Ohio equals Republican. Case closed. Move on to other states. Ohio wasn't even worth worrying about anymore. And look, that assumption made sense for a while. It really did. Ohio had been trending Republican for years going into Trump's second term. Rural counties that used to be competitive were going deep red. Manufacturing belt communities that used to be solidly blue were swinging hard toward Trump. Even some of the suburbs were moving in a more Republican direction. All the trend lines pointed the same way. So you could understand why everyone just accepted Ohio as part of the Republican base map and moved on to other concerns. But here's the thing about political assumptions. They have a very short shelf life. and the ones that seem most obvious, most inevitable, most completely baked in, those are often the ones that age the worst. Because while everyone was treating Ohio like a done deal, something was happening underneath the surface, quietly at first, and then, all at once. Voters started souring on Trump. Not just a little, not just the kind of softening you get when any president goes through a rough news cycle. We're talking about a full documented pulling back, a free fall in his numbers in a state he was supposed to own. Let me walk you through exactly what the data shows, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting and honestly kind of jaw-dropping. Early in Trump's second term, his favorability rating in Ohio was +6. 50% of Ohio voters had a favorable view of him. 44% had an unfavorable view. Okay, that's fine. That's not a blowout, but it's positive. That's a number that helps Republican candidates get the same focus is that 2% of Ohio voters' favorable view. 44% had a single favorable view. That's a president who is at minimum not hurting you. That's the wind in the sails David Niven was talking about. Then April rolled around, and that +6 had already slipped to -1, 47 favorable, 48 unfavorable. 1 wavering, 2 light pieces, 2 wides. 1 piece, 2 light, 2 light. That's any serious political operative looks at that number and their eyebrows go up. That's a warning sign. Not catastrophic yet, but it's the kind of trend you watch very carefully because when numbers move in one direction steadily, they tend to keep moving. Then October hit and the number was -10. 41% favorable, 51% unfavorable. Come on, 41%. In less than a single year of his second term, Trump went from net positive to double-digit negative in a state Republicans need to hold. A 16-point swing. And this is not national polling done by someone with a clear partisan agenda. This is Bowling Green State University polling actual Ohio voters, regular people, real Ohioers answering real questions about how they feel about their president. And here's what makes all of this even more important. Because most people, when they hear about Trump's numbers slipping, they immediately think, oh, Democrats just hate him more. And yeah, that's always part of it. Democrats have never liked Trump. That's not news. But that's not what's moving these numbers in Ohio. The part that should genuinely terrify Republican strategists is what's happening with independents, swing voters, the people who actually decide elections in competitive states. National polling from ABC, The Washington Post, and Ipsos puts Trump's approval among independents somewhere around 25%. 25%. That is not a typo. 1 in 4 independent voters approves of the job he is doing right now, and his overall disapproval nationally is sitting somewhere in the low 60s. Around 62% of Americans disapprove of what Trump is doing. Within the Republican Party, he's still the king, 85% approval, no internal challenge, no real competition. But outside that bubble, the numbers are brutal, and Ohio is full of people outside that bubble. This is why strategists are now saying something you would absolutely never have heard 2 years ago. They're saying Ohio's top Republican candidates in 2026 are probably going to have to put real distance between themselves and Trump. Not go full MAGA, not run on his name, maybe just not mention him that much at all. Think about that for a second. The party that spent years insisting you can't win without Trump, that Trumpism is the permanent future of the Republican Party, that you had to be all in or you lose your base, now has strategists quietly whispering that some candidates might need to steer clear of their own sitting president. That is a massive shift in thinking. The candidates we're talking about here are John Husted, who's running for Senate in Ohio, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who is running for governor. These are Trump-adjacent candidates. They have Trump's fingerprints all over their political identities. And according to analysis coming out of Ohio, both of those races are already way too close for comfort. Ramaswamy holds only a 3-point lead over Democrat Amy Acton in the governor's race, 50-47, in a state that just a couple years ago should have been a comfortable double-digit Republican lead. In the Senate race between Husted and former Senator Sherrod Brown, it's basically a dead heat. Sherrod Brown, who lost his Senate seat, is in a dead heat trying to get it back. Are you kidding me? That's wild. That is genuinely wild. Now, I know some people will say it's still early. Polls change, 2026 is a ways off, and that's fair. But here's what makes this situation different. The primary data is already telling the same story as the favorability data. NPR covered the Ohio primaries and described the whole cycle as a fresh assessment of Donald Trump's standing among voters. And the early voting data from those primaries showed Democratic primary ballots outpacing Republican primary ballots by about 11%. 11%. That's not a rounding error. That is enthusiasm. That is an energized Democratic base showing up early and showing out, and Republicans, by comparison, are just not matching that energy right now. In modern American politics, that kind of early vote gap often predicts where general election turnout is heading. When one side is fired up in the primaries and the other side isn't, that energy differential tends to hold through November. So you've got Trump's favorability collapsing, you've got swing voters abandoning him, you've got Republican candidates in suddenly competitive races, you've got Democrats outpacing Republicans in early primary voting. And you've got national polling showing the president underwater by double digits with the broader American public. That's a lot of bad signs, all pointing in the same direction at the same time. And the reason most people aren't fully grasping this story is because we've been conditioned to treat Ohio as a red state now. That's just the category it lives in. Ohio equals Republican. We accepted it as a fact of nature. But politics doesn't work like that. States shift, and they can shift faster than you think when the conditions change underneath them. Ohio shifted toward Republicans when Trump's message connected with working-class voters who felt ignored by Democrats. But those same voters, the ones who crossed over, who gave him a chance, they're not ideologically locked in. They voted on hope and economic expectation, and right now they're checking the scorecard, and the scorecard is not looking great. Let's break this all the way down into the clearest possible terms because there are a few distinct things happening here, and I want each one to land properly. Before we wrap this up, we're going to go point by point, nice and clean. And by the end of this, you'll have the full picture of why Ohio matters so much, not just for 2026, but for the bigger story about where Trump's political power actually stands right now. Trump went from being a cheat code to being a liability in Ohio. And it happened faster than anyone expected. A year ago, just 1 year ago, having Trump's endorsement in Ohio actually meant something. It drove turnout. It generated media coverage. It signaled to the base that you were the real deal. Being close to Trump gave Republican candidates an edge in a state he had won convincingly. Now that same association is starting to sink candidates in races that should have been safe. The BGSU polling makes this undeniable, a 16-point swing in under 12 months. And the most alarming thing isn't just the number itself, it's the speed. This didn't happen over years of gradual erosion. This happened fast. And when numbers move that fast in one direction, they rarely bounce back easily, especially when the underlying conditions driving that movement haven't changed. Think about what Ohio voters were promised. They were sold economic revival. Lower prices, manufacturing coming back, winning, so much winning, and then they look around at the actual economy. Prices still elevated, tariff uncertainty rippling through supply chains, market volatility rattling people's savings. And they feel the gap. They feel the space between the promise and the reality. And in Ohio, a state built on manufacturing and working-class communities that made real tangible things, that gap hits differently than it does in other places. It's not abstract, it's personal. It's your job, your pension, your town. When Trump was delivering, or at least seemed like he might deliver on the timeline, Ohio voters were patient. Now the patience is running out, and that's showing up in the numbers with a clarity that's impossible to spin away. Here's the bind Ohio Republicans are stuck in. And honestly, from a pure political science standpoint, it is kind of fascinating to watch, even if it's a nightmare to actually live through. If you're running for Senate or governor in Ohio right now, you're trapped between two impossible options with no clean exit. You can go full Trump, you embrace the brand, you run as MAGA, you show up at his events, you champion his agenda, you make absolutely sure the base knows you are 100% loyal and never wavered for a second. And that keeps your hardcore voters happy. They show up on election day, they donate, they volunteer. But the swing voters, the independents, the crossover Democrats, the people who are now disapproving of Trump 3-1 nationally, they look at you and they see Trump and they vote against you. Or you can try to create some daylight. You talk about your own vision, your own agenda. You don't explicitly run away from Trump. That would be political suicide in a Republican primary, but you just don't lean into him. You let him be his own thing and try to carve out a separate identity for yourself in the minds of voters. But then your base gets restless. They start asking, why isn't he defending the president? Is he going soft? Is he one of those establishment rhinos? And you risk those voters staying home on election day. There is no clean answer here. There is no version of this where Ohio Republicans can thread that needle perfectly. And that is exactly why smart strategists are now saying Husted and Ramaswamy will likely have to steer clear of Trump because tying yourself too tightly to him risks bleeding the swing votes you might not need. But distancing yourself risks bleeding the base. It is a tightrope with no safety net, and this is the direct consequence of building an entire party around one personality. When that personality is an asset, everything flows naturally. So when you look at the fact that you may be convinced, when that personality becomes a liability, you're stuck because you can't easily rebrand, you can't easily pivot. The whole infrastructure, the whole donor network, the whole base are all built around that one person. And suddenly that person is bilge water, something you have to pump out just to keep from sinking. Ohio isn't just Ohio, it's a warning for the entire Midwest. With Trump's approval among independents at just 25%, and Republicans already fearing the Senate majority could flip, the state that once proved his working-class realignment is now a preview of potential collapse in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Swing voters, by definition, swing, and 3-1 disapproval doesn't win competitive states. And look, I'm not here to be a cheerleader for either party. I'm here to read what the data actually says and explain it clearly. And what the data is saying right now is that Ohio Democrats are energized in a way they genuinely have not been in years. 11% more Democratic primary ballots than Republican primary ballots in early voting. That is a significant gap. That's the kind of enthusiasm differential that shows up again in ground game advantages and volunteer hours and small dollar donations and general election turnout. Amy Acton is within 3 points of Ramaswamy. Sherrod Brown, who lost his Senate seat, is in a dead heat trying to get it back. These are not the numbers of a locked-up red state. These are the numbers of a genuine, contested, competitive battleground state. And if Democrats can force Republicans to spend real money defending Ohio instead of going on offense in places they'd rather be competing, that reshuffles the entire 2026 national map. That drains resources and attention away from where Republicans want to focus. That is a strategic nightmare for Republican leadership in Washington, and it all connects back to the same root cause. The story of Ohio in 2025 and 2026 is partly the story of what happens when economic promises don't pan out on the timeline voters were expecting. Trump ran on making life cheaper, lower prices, affordable groceries, a booming economy. And on that specific promise, the one that probably moved more swing votes than any other single issue, the results have been mixed at best. Prices are still high. Tariffs are adding economic uncertainty. People are watching their savings bounce around, and in a state like Ohio, where people's relationship with the economy is very direct and very personal, that stuff matters more than just about anything else. This is why the independents are moving, not because they suddenly love Democrats, not because they had some big ideological awakening. It's simpler than that. It's the groceries eat, it's the gas pump number. It's looking at your monthly budget and feeling like things were supposed to be better by now. And when that feeling sets in, when voters feel like the promise and the reality don't line up, they start looking for someone to hold responsible. And right now in Ohio, that someone is Trump. Ohio is the story of what happens when political gravity catches up with a party that bet everything on one man. Swing voters, by definition, swing, and they're reassessing their support. If the trend lines hold through 2026, Republicans could face a very different Midwest map than the one they thought they had locked up, with Ohio as just the preview.